Have you ever felt like you're gradually becoming invisible in your family? The children who used to cling to you every day are now distant, indifferent, sometimes irritable, or so thoughtless that you wonder, what did I do wrong? This reality is not easy to face, but far more common than you might think. As children grow up, the boundary between love and independence begins to be redrawn. The roles between parents and children also change over time. No longer dependent on every word of advice, your child now has their own thoughts, choices, and boundaries. However, during this process of growing up, many children unintentionally drift away from their parents, not only in physical distance, but also in how they behave, speak, and act. Respect is no longer a given. Impatient words, indifferent glances, or no longer listening to you all gradually become the new normal. And at that point, how will you respond as a father or mother? Many people quietly grieve. Many fall ill from silent emotional wounds. But some choose a different path, the path of wisdom. Because every relationship, even with your children, needs principles of behavior. No one is born knowing how to respect others, not even their parents. Respect is something that must be taught, reminded of, and preserved through the way you live. Today's video is not meant to push you away from your children. On the contrary, this article offers 7 solutions to help you reestablish respect so your children can understand, love, and grow closer to you. No more begging for attention. No more exhausting explanations, but rather companionship, equality, love, and steadiness. If you feel this topic touches on what you're going through, please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the profound content created for parents like you. If you've ever been in a similar situation, share your story in the comments. You are not alone, and your story may help someone else find their way. Now, let's begin with the very first action, a simple but mighty act. Action 1. Stop over-explaining. Let silence speak. Have you noticed yourself doing this? Your child snaps at you. You try to explain that you want to care. They grow cold. You try to make it clear you didn't mean to intrude. They act indifferent. You try to prove that you only want what's best for them. And then, at some point, you're exhausted. Not because your love has faded, but because you've said too much and haven't been heard. There's a truth many people don't want to accept. The more you explain, the more you lose your dignity. In the parent-child relationship, respect doesn't come from justification, but from how one holds one's sense of worth. Why do you need to stop? When you try too hard to explain yourself, you unknowingly place yourself in a weaker position. You're sending a message that says, I need you to understand me so I can feel worthy. But you don't need to seek sympathy to deserve respect. Silence is a form of strength when used at the right moment. It says you don't need to prove yourself. It says you're steady enough that you don't need to be approved to feel secure. Silence is not indifference. It means you choose not to lower yourself to explain things others have already decided not to understand. And it means you let your actions and attitude, not your explanations, define who you are. Let me tell you about Mr. Stephen, a 74-year-old father who used to be a university professor. For years, he tried to clarify everything whenever his son showed frustration. He wrote long emails and sent messages explaining every move he made, always hoping his son would understand that Dad didn't mean to bother. But in return, came only deeper coldness. Then one day, he stopped. No more emails. No more long texts. Just one short sentence when his son acted distant. "When you're ready to talk respectfully, I'll be here." And then he was silent. Not distant, but clear. Not angry, but no longer lowering himself. A week later, his son called. For the first time in years, he asked how his father was doing, and they began talking like two adults, not like someone constantly defending himself while the other endlessly blamed. The change didn't start with a speech. It started with silent dignity. You don't need to explain who you are. You just need to live according to your values and let others decide whether they deserve to enter that inner world. If you're still watching this video and feel this message speaks to you, please leave the number 1 in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to continue receiving profound content that helps you live steadily, peacefully, and with dignity in your later years. Action 2. Set boundaries and enforce them. Many parents wonder why their children increasingly disregard their words, even showing cold and careless attitudes. But few are willing to face one truth. Sometimes you taught them that disrespect is acceptable. We don't set boundaries. Or we put them and then fail to enforce them. That is a weakness that children, whether unintentionally or deliberately, will lean on to keep pushing the limits. Gradually, parents lose their position, their voice. Boundaries are not threats. They are an explicit declaration of your values, that you deserve to be treated with respect by anyone, even your children. And enforcing those boundaries is how you teach your children what healthy love looks like. I once met a woman named Cynthia. She was 66 years old, a former high school teacher in Texas, and now living alone after her husband passed away. She has 3 grown children, all successful. But instead of feeling happy, she felt disappointed and hurt every time her children visited. They never asked how she was feeling. They talked more to each other and their phones than to her. Once, her youngest child even criticized her for not knowing how to use a phone right in front of friends. She just laughed it off and let it go. But then she realized she had allowed her children to do this too often. And now, she was no longer respected the way she once was. From that day forward, she began to change. When her children interrupted her, she didn't keep talking. She gently stood up and walked into another room. When they came over, but stayed glued to their phones, she calmly said, "If you're only here to scroll through your feed, I'll kindly decline the visit next time." At first, her children reacted, but eventually, they listened. They realized that their mother wasn't joking, and that she deserved to be treated better. Here's the question. How often have you stayed silent to keep the peace, while deep down it felt like salt on a wound? How often have you tolerated things, only to lose your place as someone truly loved? You don't have to shout. Just stay calm and firm. The more precise you are, the more your children will learn boundaries. And from there, respect will slowly return. If you've ever been in a situation like Cynthia's, or are trying to reclaim your place in your family, please leave a comment below that says, "I'm starting." And don't forget to share this video with a father or mother who needs their own voice. Action 3. Don't argue. Lead by action. Many elderly parents fall into a common trap. The more they try to explain, the more negatively their children react. The more you talk, the less they listen. Because after a certain age, Children no longer learn from what you say. They learn from how you live. The reason is that words lose weight if not backed by consistent behavior. Arguing, pleading, or justifying only makes you seem weaker in their eyes, especially when you're repeating old phrases without showing any new actions. Leading by action means you live according to what you believe, regardless of whether others acknowledge it. You are silent but steady. You don't argue, but you also don't back down. I remember Mr. Franklin, 74 years old, living in Oregon. He was a chief engineer, and people used to listen to him. But his son often argued with him in old age, calling him old-fashioned and stubborn. Many arguments broke out between them, leaving both tired and distant. One day, Mr. Franklin changed his approach. Instead of trying to talk to be understood, he chose silence and action. When his son complained that he shouldn't live alone at this age and should move into a nursing home, he didn't react. But afterward, he repaired his kitchen, tended his garden, and invited his son for dinner in a tidy, peaceful, independent home. His son was surprised. Gradually, he argued less, began to ask questions, and started to listen. Because what Mr. Franklin did was stronger than anything he had ever said. What's the lesson? When you stop arguing, you don't become weaker. You are switching to a new language, the language of steadiness, self-respect, and quiet strength. Ask yourself, how much have you said, and how much have you done in the past week? What would happen if you stopped arguing and started living as a silent but clear example? If you believe in the power of actions over words, type the number 3 in the comment section below so I know you're still here and starting again in a wiser way. Action 4. Withdraw emotional dependence. Have you ever felt sad all day just because your child didn't call back? Or felt meaningless when they didn't need your advice? That's when you've handed too much of your emotional world into your child's hands, only to have those same emotions turn around and control you. Emotional dependence is not the same as love. Love is given freely. Dependence is when you need your child to respond to feel valuable. And in the busy world of adult children, that rarely happens the way you hope. I remember Miss Irene, 69 years old, a former librarian in Chicago. She retired and moved close to her daughter's house, hoping to bond and help raise her grandchild. But her daughter was busy and didn't visit often. One day, after a call went unanswered, Ms. Irene cried. The feeling of being abandoned pulled her into mild depression. Then one day, she heard a talk at a community center about independent women after 60. She realized she had placed her happiness in someone else's hands. From that day on, Ms. Irene began signing up for painting classes, joined a book club, and reconnected with old friends. She still loved her daughter, but no longer depended on her emotionally. A few months later, her daughter started visiting more often. You seem so happy. I want to be near you, her daughter said, for the first time in years. Do you see? When you withdraw emotional dependence, you don't become cold. You reclaim your mental sovereignty. If you're waiting for a phone call from your child to feel worthy, it's time to call yourself instead. Call out the joys, the things that give your life meaning. Are you emotionally dependent on your children? Everyone has their own story as they enter old age. If you see a part of yourself in this video, share your experience. Who knows? What you share might become a small light for someone in need. Action 5. Stop seeking their approval. Many elderly parents fall into an invisible trap, seeking approval from the very children they once raised. They don't realize that they are losing their self-respect in that longing. Approval is a deep emotional need. But when you start bending yourself, avoiding conflict, and even pretending to agree just to be liked by your children, you are slowly giving up your place as a parent. This false closeness doesn't last. Your silence may buy you a moment of peace, but it ultimately teaches others to disregard your feelings and boundaries. I once spoke with Ms. Loretta, a 69-year-old former nurse who raised two children alone after her husband passed away. She shared, "I was always afraid they'd be upset, so I never said what I thought. I figured as long as they were happy, I'd be okay. But over time, they stopped asking for my opinion. I was just the helper, nothing more." One day, she stopped saying yes to everything. When her son asked to borrow money for an investment, she said no for the first time. The initial reaction was anger. But then, her son returned, apologized, and asked for her opinion more often. When you stop seeking approval, you reclaim yourself. Genuine respect comes from living in alignment with your values, not pleasing others. We don't need to be the nicest person to be loved. We need to be ourselves, honest, transparent, and grounded. And if you're afraid that your children will distance themselves when you stop seeking approval, remember, genuine relationships don't break just because you speak the truth. On the contrary, when you begin to respect yourself, others learn how to respect you too. Are you trading your self-respect to keep the peace? Share your thoughts below. And if this action speaks to you, click like so I know you're still walking this journey with me. Remember to subscribe to the channel to continue following content that helps you live stronger and freer every day. Action 6. Stop giving when you're not being valued. Many elderly parents still give to their children, watching the grandkids, helping with money, doing housework. But in return, they receive coldness, judgment, and even disrespect. Why is that? Because when you give unconditionally, without boundaries, you teach others that you don't need to be appreciated. They receive, but they no longer feel grateful. They begin to believe it's just expected, and you keep giving, while your heart grows more and more weary. Mr. Harold, 73 years old, a retired laborer, shared that he had lent money to his children many times and looked after his grandchild every day, but he had never once received a thank you. One day, he fell ill and could no longer go to their house. No one asked what he needed. "I realized I wasn't being loved. I was just being used," he said. From then on, he began to say no to unreasonable requests, only helping when he felt genuine appreciation. You don't have to cut everything off, but you do need to know when it's time to stop. Love is not unlimited sacrifice. It must be nourished by respect. If you keep giving but are never heard, asked about, or thanked, maybe it's time to take a step back. You deserve to rest, to be cared for, and to be loved, not because you're helping, but because of who you are. Giving is beautiful, but it must come from a place of self-respect. If not, you will become exhausted, physically and emotionally. Remember, you are not selfish when asking for respect. You are protecting yourself. Are you giving out of love or fear of being left behind? Leave a comment and share your story. Your words help someone else recognize themselves. If you found this message meaningful, please share it with a friend. Someone out there might need to hear this today. Action 7. Build a life outside of your children. One of the most common mistakes many parents make is centering their entire lives around their children. But that not only leaves you feeling lost, but it also places silent pressure on your children and leads to growing distance. You have the right to your own life, an independent journey, even in old age. When you live joyfully, actively, and with purpose, you don't just inspire others, you earn their respect. Ms. Margaret, 71 years old, a former teacher, shared, "After my husband passed away, I almost lived just to wait for my children and grandchildren to visit. Every time they didn't come, I felt invisible." Later, she decided to join a book club, take up painting, and travel with new friends. "I don't wait around anymore. I live." And strangely, my children started visiting more. They want to know what I'm up to. You may have spent your entire life taking care of your children, but that doesn't mean you're not allowed to live for yourself at this age. You can start with small things: a class, a meetup with friends, a short trip. Your life doesn't end when your children grow up. It's opening into a new chapter. Are you still living as a mother, or have you become a shadow of yourself? Take a minute to think about that. And if you're ready to rebuild your life, type the number 7 below. I'll walk this journey with you in future videos. You are not alone. The journey of renewing yourself always begins with one small decision: the decision to live for yourself. Are you living with your children, or just living beside people who used to be your children? That's not an easy question to answer, but if you feel the relationship growing more distant, maybe it's time to pause, to reflect, understand, and begin healing. Family is one of the most sacred things in life. The bond between parents and children is not just blood, it's memory, nurturing, and silent sacrifice over decades. So when that bond begins to crack, don't ignore it. Don't comfort yourself by thinking they'll understand when they're older. Because sometimes, if we don't actively seek to heal, that crack becomes a permanent gap. Life is finite. We don't have endless time for resentment, silence, for holding back the things we've never said. If you are still alive and have someone to call child, then cherish that. Cherish it by living stronger and wiser and setting more precise boundaries, not to create distance, but to grow closer through respect and love. And if you, the child, are watching this video, please take a moment to call home, ask, and listen. Not because your parents demand it, but because you are lucky to have parents to call, love, and be loved by. What do you think about the actions shared in this video? Leave a comment below. Share the one that made you reflect the most. Or if you have advice for other parents, share it so we can all grow stronger together. If you found this video helpful, please click like to show your support. Please share the video with someone who might need it. Remember to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you can continue following meaningful and heartfelt content created for the journey of parenthood. Because happiness doesn't come from controlling your children. It comes from learning how to love yourself with healthy boundaries.